host now, so I need you.
I guess we need to let people know it's being recorded as well.
Hi, everybody. We're just going to get started in a few moments here. We're just going to let everybody trickle in. And just a heads up that this session is being recorded. And it will be shared with you by email after the fact. Hey, welcome everyone. And thank you for joining us for today's session. Before we begin, while we meet here on a virtual platform, I want to take a moment to recognize the importance of the land on which we are each located. We acknowledge the territory to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in building positive relationships between nations and in developing a deep understanding of Indigenous peoples and their cultures. Today, I'm joining you from unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. We invite you to take a moment to reflect on the territory that you are joining us from. And if you like, you could share that acknowledgement in the chat. At MediaSmarts, we strive to ground our work in care and reciprocity. This includes being in a constant state of learning, especially when it comes to understanding the digital well-being and experiences of Indigenous peoples and communities across Canada. Thank you. So again, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's session. My name is Trisha Grant, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at MediaSmarts. I'm also here speaking on behalf of Get Cyber Safe, the Government of Canada's public awareness campaign to help Canadians stay safe online. They're our partner on this event today. October is Cyber Month, and this week is Media Literacy Week. So we've come together to share these resources. We're also very proud to be partnering with the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse and Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario on these workshops. Together, we're going to help Canadians of all ages and backgrounds build the digital skills and confidence needed to stay secure online. And today, we're going to walk through some practical ways that we can strengthen our online safety by finding great and accurate sources of information. So before we get started, we're going to warm up by sharing a little tune from our friends at Get Cyber Safe. So I will turn it over to them.
When I look back now, I start to reflect the things I did right to keep my online life in check. The risk I dodged, the hacks I outsmarted. It all began the day I got cyber safe hearted. Secured my accounts, all my devices too. Automatic updates, the least that I could do. Firewalls and vigilance, artificial intelligence with new AI threats. There's no precedence. Get cyber safe now for future you. Spotted scans with a sharper view. Phishing emails I saw right through. No data stolen, no identity miss. I click with caution and I always second guess. I always second guess. phrases. All you need to turn on multi-step just like the cyber pros do. Use the VPN on public Wi-Fi. Ignore the fake news that caught my eye. Backed up my files, kept my software clean. Now I'm living the digital dream. 'Cause I'm safe now for future you. Spotted scares with the sharper view. Phishing emails I saw right through. No data stolen, no identity miss. I think with caution and I always second guess. I always second guess. Ransomware tried to lock my world away, but with backup saved, I was okay. I didn't gatekeep, I shared what I knew. Help friends and family all level up too. So thank you, me, for thinking ahead, for learning the risks, for doing what's said. You kept us safe, our future bright. We got cyber safe and we got it so right.
All right, thanks so much, Get Cyber Safe. I'm definitely going to have that song stuck in my head for the rest of the day. So now I'm going to turn it over to Rayanne from Elder Abuse Ontario Prevention to say a few words.
Thank you. So thank you. I want to thank MediaSmarts and Get Cyber Safe for inviting Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario to be a partner for this webinar today and the series that we've been hosting to bring more attention to Cyber Security Awareness Month. I think the sessions have been really educational so far, and I'm sure today's will be as well. And so I'm Rayanne Rideout, the Director of Strategic Partnerships with Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. We are a provincial organization that recognizes that's been recognized for our leadership in preventing elder abuse across the province. We provide training, education, and resources on information on the complexity of elder abuse. We work towards our vision is to make sure that older adults are free from ageism, abuse, and their human rights are advanced and protected. So we have a lot of resource and information also on fraud awareness and security. And so please check out our website at eapon.ca, and I'll put that in the chat box. And we have many webinars as well that for older adults in this realm of around cybersecurity and fraud prevention and many other issues. So please take a chance to look us up. My colleague who's unable to come today is from the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. And that is a national organization, again, taking a national scope on educating individuals, doing training, policy, and advocacy on behalf of older adults to ensure their safety and well-being and prevention of elder abuse as well. So I will put both of our websites, and please look us up. We also work collaboratively hosting some events as well and partnering on events such as with MediaSmarts and Get Cyber Safe. So thank you for inviting us, and I look forward to our presentation today.
Okay, thanks, Rayanne. So now it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Matthew Johnson. Matthew Johnson is the Director of Education at MediaSmarts Canada Centre for Digital Media Literacy. He's the author of many of our lessons, parent materials, and other educational materials. He's served on expert panels convened by the Canadian Pediatric Society, the Sexual Information and Education Council of Canada, and the Information and Privacy Commissioner of Ontario, among many others. So today I'll pass it over to you, Matthew. And you are muted, Matthew.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Tricia, and thank you. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks you, Rayanne, for joining us. And Tricia, if you can just confirm for me that we're seeing my screen and
Yes,
me in
all
the little
good.
box. All right, perfect. So thank you, everyone, for joining our session on navigating online information. This is a part of our Digital Smarts series, which is a series of workshops on teaching essential digital media literacy skills. There are three groups of these webinars: our Explore series, our Discover series, and the Navigate series. They are for different levels of digital skills. So I encourage you to check out the Digital Smarts material on our website. All of it is available for free, and you can share it with other people in your lives who have more or less levels of digital literacy. Before we get started, there are two opportunities to provide feedback on this workshop to our team at MediaSmarts. One right now before we get into the workshop content, and another at the very end. But we do encourage you to do both of those. These are designed to evaluate and improve MediaSmarts workshops and, generally speaking, our digital media literacy programming. So I will invite you to take 5 minutes to complete this survey. You can do it while I'm talking. I won't be offended. All answers are anonymous. We do not collect any data at all, any information about you other than what you choose to enter if you choose to complete these surveys. But of course, they are entirely voluntary. The aim is to evaluate the workshop, not you. So it's perfectly fine if you're unsure how to answer some questions, or if you don't feel you have some of the skills being asked about in the survey. You can absolutely leave some parts of it blank. So if you're interested in taking the survey, you can take a phone or something else to scan the QR code on the screen, and there's also a link being placed in the chat. And I'll leave that up for just another moment before we get started. So once again, welcome to our session on navigating online information. We are going to have time for questions at the end. You have two different ways of asking questions. You can place them in the chat, or you can place them in the Q&A. We will look at both and answer all the questions we have time for at the end. So as soon as you think of a question, put it right in the chat. We'll come back to them. That's just to make sure you don't forget any questions you may have thought of. So before we get started, I'd like you to think for a few moments about what it is you're hoping to learn from this workshop. For example, what are some kinds of information that you look for online? What are some things that maybe you've had trouble finding in the past? And what would you like to learn more about when it comes to finding things online? As we all know, the internet is an amazing source of information. Almost anything you might want or need to know is out there somewhere. The problem is there's so much information, it can be hard to find what you're looking for. And it can be hard to tell whether or not you can trust the information that you've found. The good news is it's not too hard to learn some very simple skills and habits that will make both of those a lot easier. So at the end of this workshop, you'll know how to find good information using search engines like Google, how to use different sources of information like Wikipedia, how to judge whether what you see on social networks or on sites like YouTube is reliable, and how to choose the best online source for different kinds of information. And finally, we'll also talk a little bit about some of the ways that we can effectively use AI to find and verify information. We mostly get online information from four kinds of places. First, search engines like Google. Second, social networks like Facebook, X, or Instagram. Sharing sites like YouTube or Pinterest. And online encyclopedias like Wikipedia. Search engines like Google or Bing are usually our first stop when we're looking for online information, but they shouldn't be your last stop. That's because the results you get from search engines aren't organized by which are most accurate. They're sorted by which are most relevant to your question. Sometimes the result Google thinks is the most relevant is wrong or misleading. For example, the top result for the question, "Who built Stonehenge?" is a link to a good article, but you can see the part of the article that's been highlighted here is describing an old, incorrect theory. As well, the top results for any search are often ads that people have paid for you to see. What questions you ask have a big influence on the answers that you get from a search engine. Even quite small differences in the question can make a big difference in the answer. If we ask, how many colors are there? The top answer is 10 million. But if we ask, how many colors are there in the rainbow? It's just 7. So, we shouldn't think of Google or other search engines as a way of getting one answer. Skip the box at the top, which is now often an AI summary, and take a look at the links and the snippets further down instead. A search engine gives you links to other sources, but it's up to you to choose which ones are up to date and reliable. Because search engines give you the results they think are the most relevant to you, you need to be careful how you word your searches. If you ask if pancakes are better than waffles, for example, you'll get results that say that. If your search asks for the opposite, if you're searching for why waffles are better than pancakes, you'll get opposite results. Instead, you want to word your search as plainly as possible so that it's not weighted towards one side or the other of a question. For the same reason, you mostly shouldn't use the suggested searches that Google offers you once you start typing. That's because they're based on everybody else's searches of similar topics. So it looks at every time people have made searches that started with similar words, and it uses that to guess what it thinks you're typing. But that can lead you to badly phrased questions. There are also some things you could add to your search terms to make them more specific. So for instance, you can use the word "and" in all capital letters or the plus sign to show that results have to include 2 or more terms. So if you wanted to get information about raptor birds and not the Toronto Raptors, you can search for raptors plus bird. And you see there's no space between the plus and the word bird. It's important not to have a space there so it knows that the plus sign applies to the word bird. You can also put words or phrases in quotation marks. Putting a word in quotation marks means it has to be in every search result. So you will only get search results that include that word. Putting a phrase in quotation marks means that the search engine will look for those words in that order. So instead of searching for raptors, you might get better results searching for birds of prey. And we use the quotes so we only get results with those 3 words in that order. Once you've got a set of results, don't just click on the top one. Remember, the order doesn't tell you anything about how useful or reliable they are. Instead, look through the list and decide which one seems likely to be the best. Sometimes you'll know already that some sources are better than others for different topics. If you're more interested in which are healthier, for instance, you'll know right away the result from muscle and fitness is probably the best. If you want to know which taste better, you might go with Chowhound. And you probably don't have to click on the song Waffles Are Better Than Pancakes by Doja Cat to know it's not what you're looking for. Once you've chosen which one you think is probably going to be the best choice, open it in a new tab. A tab is like a window, except you can see them lined up along your screen, so you can click from one to another easily. It's good to open search results in a new tab because if you decide one result isn't the best one, you can easily go back to your search results. It also makes it easier to compare two different results because they're in separate tabs. To open a link in a new tab on a PC, click with the right mouse button so that this window appears, and then click on Open Link in New Tab. So you can also use the right part of the mouse pad or of the touchpad if you're using a laptop without a mouse. If you're using a Mac, you hold down the Command key before clicking a link, and that will open it in a new tab. Oops, sorry. And on a phone, whether it's an Android or an iOS device, hold your finger down on the link for a few seconds until a window pops up with Open in New Tab, and then tap on that. A lot of the time, though, just looking at a website isn't enough to tell you whether or not you can trust it. There's no easy way to tell whether the American Academy of Pediatrics site is more or less reliable than the American College of Pediatricians, for example. Both of them look very professional. Both of them claim to represent American pediatricians. Sometimes this doesn't matter. If you need to know how late the library is open, you know that you can trust the library's website. But if you're looking for something more complicated, especially something that might have any political aspect, you need to double check. This is where opening our sources in tabs comes in so helpful. It's easy for someone online to say anything they want about themselves, so we want to know what other people have to say about them. We can open all the sources we want to double check in new tabs. So you see here, we have aap.org open in one tab and acpeds.org open in another one. And the first tab on the left has our Google search. So now we go back to Google and we do a search for each of them. Doing a search for each of these groups shows us that the American Academy of Pediatrics has 64,000 members, while the American College of Pediatricians has just 500. Even if we don't read the details of why one group split off from the other, we can see the first group represents a lot more doctors. Sometimes, when we do a search on a source, most of the results may be the source's own website. To be able to find out what other people say about it, we can use another search trick, the minus sign. We can use the minus sign to exclude a particular word. So, for instance, if we wanted to search for Raptors, but not the Toronto Raptors, we could use the minus sign and then Toronto. But we can also use that to leave out a specific website. Here, we're searching for American College of Pediatricians, and then we have the minus sign and then their website. That means that we're going to get every reference to them except their own website. That tells us what other people say about them. And to get even more relevant results, you can see we put American College of Pediatricians in quotation marks to get those 4 words in that order. And as you can see, we get a lot of information about them that other people are saying. You can sometimes get better results as well by using a specialist search engine. Some of these are part of bigger search engines. Google has separate engines for images, for shopping, for maps, and for news. The news search is very useful because, unlike the main search, Google limits what sources are included in the news tab. It's not 100% reliable, but for most topics, it's more reliable than regular Google. For example, if we do a search for vaccine exemption in the main Google tab, 2 of the top results are a misleading source that's spreading misinformation about vaccinations. If we do the same search in the news tab, we get news stories from mostly reliable sources. So let's do a quick quiz to check that you understood everything we just talked about. Now, don't feel nervous about this. No one's going to know how well you did on the quiz. It's just to help you remember what we've talked about today. So here is our first question. Why should you be careful with suggested searches that appear in the search box? Is it because they're what Google has chosen for you? Is it because they're made to steer you to particular websites? Is it because they're what Google thinks you're looking for? Or is it because they're based on what other people have searched for? If you like, you can put the letter that you think is the right answer in the chat, or you can just answer in your own head. So autocomplete is based on what other people who've entered the same thing as you wound up searching for. It's just like the autocomplete on your phone. When you start writing something, it looks at what most people are writing once you've put in that first, second, or third letter. So it's important not to use the suggested searches because getting good information from Google depends a lot on asking the right question. When something is the top result on Google, that means Google thinks it's the most reliable result, the most relevant result, the most recent result, or all 3 of those. Once again, you can, if you want, put your answer in the put your answer in the chat or just answer for yourself. So we do have one person saying that the top result is sponsored, and that is true. So I'm talking about the results that come after the sponsored results, but that's a very good point that usually you will have what are basically paid ads as the top results after the AI summary. Those are marked as being sponsored, and then you get the top results. So I always recommend ignore the AI summary, ignore the sponsored results, then look at the actual results. And those are sorted by what Google thinks is the most relevant to you. It does pay a little bit of attention to how recent things are. It does pay a little bit of attention to how reliable they are, particularly on some topics. So if it is about health or if it's about things that might affect your finances, they do downgrade things that they don't think are reliable. But mostly it is a question of what is relevant to your question or your query. All right. Why is the News tab more reliable than the main Google search? Is it because it only shows the most recent results? Because it limits the search to reliable sources? Because it limits the search to mostly reliable sources? Or because it limits the search to newspapers and TV outlets? We may have, oh, it looks like we have a guest here. And I think this one people remembered pretty well because we just talked about it a few minutes ago. Yes, it limits the search to mostly reliable sources. So it limits it to real news sources that really exist. That's better than 90% of the internet, but it does include some very partisan sources, some very biased sources. It's better to use the news search to get basic facts on whether or not something happened and to look at multiple sources to get different sides of a story. And what is the best way to find out if a website is a reliable source? Do we check to see if the website is a .org? Do we read the About Us page? Do we do a search on them? Or do we see if it has ads or spelling mistakes? And it looks like, again, we just talked about this a few moments ago. That's exactly right. There's not much you can find out about a page just by looking at it. It doesn't mean anything if a website has a .org address. Anyone can register a .org website. And of course, the About Us page is just what they want you to know about them. So instead, we do a search and check Wikipedia to make sure there's evidence that a source is reliable. So we're not going to do this exercise right now, but here's something you can try later on. Using some of the things we've just looked at, think about what is the best way to answer this question. What's the best way to treat a mosquito bite? How would you answer that question if you were using a search engine? So now we're going to talk about encyclopedias. Of course, Wikipedia is the most well-known online encyclopedia. There are some old-style encyclopedias online, like Britannica.com, but most online encyclopedias are made by their users, like Wikipedia is. And we have to be aware of that when we use them as information. Wikipedia is very good for getting basic information about things you don't know that much about. If you want to find out what most people think about, for instance, a website or a group or a topic, Wikipedia is a good place to go. It's not as good for things that are happening right now, like news stories. It's also not as useful for topics that not many people are interested in, because those articles don't tend to be very large and they're not watched very closely. Wikipedia articles are written by volunteers. How good a Wikipedia article is depends on how much work those volunteers have put into it. The article on the Toronto Raptors, for example, is many times longer than the one on the little-known dinosaur Linoraptor. That doesn't mean the article on Linoraptor isn't accurate, but it does mean it has a lot less information, and that if somebody added something that wasn't right, it would take longer for other users to spot it and change it back. When Wikipedia users and editors notice something wrong with an article, but they're not able to fix it right away, they warn readers by adding a cleanup message. Cleanup messages always look like this, with the orange circle and the white exclamation mark. Cleanup messages don't necessarily mean an article is unreliable, but they are a sign that you need to double check against other sources to be sure. Wikipedia also has volunteer editors who give a rating to each article. These ratings range from stub, meaning an article that just has a few details, to featured article, which means it's one of the best articles on Wikipedia. You can see the rating by clicking on the Talk tab at the top of the article. This will show you what the people who are working on the article are saying about it. It helps to know if there's an argument going on about some of the facts in the article. Like a cleanup message, a low rating doesn't necessarily mean an article is bad, but it does mean you'll want to keep looking for better sources of information. A lot of times, when we get information or hear about news, it's not because we went looking for it. It's because it came to us on social networks like Facebook or Instagram. These are good sources for personal news about friends and family, and they can be a good way of finding out about news when it happens, but they're not a good way to get the whole story. That's because we don't usually get enough information to decide whether or not a story is reliable. In this post, for example, where this story actually came from, a website called folio.ca, is just about the least visible part. Not surprisingly, most of us decide whether or not to believe something on social media based on who shared it with us, or just whether or not it feels right. But neither of those are very good indicators. As a result, we can't assume that anything we see on social media is true or false unless we check it out. Even if we know that the source is reliable, like with these stories from Forbes and the CBC, we still need to click through them to see that the first one is several years old and the second one is more of an opinion piece than a news story. That important context gets lost as soon as something gets shared on social media. If we don't recognize the source as being reliable, we have to do the same thing we did with Google. Do a search to see what we can find out about them. In this case, there isn't a lot of information about the website folio.ca online, but the official University of Alberta website does tell us its purpose is to share expertise from the University of Alberta. So we found one clue, that it is what it says it is, and that it's associated with a reliable source. Now, that tells us we might not want to make this our only source because it only has stories that the university wants to tell, but it does tell us that what it publishes is probably going to be accurate. Another way to check a news story that comes to you from social media is to search for it on the Google News tab. That'll show you whether other news sources are covering it. If they're not, it might be a sign the original story isn't true. So this post on X says its source is the Associated Press, but it doesn't give a link to the story. If it gave a link, we could follow the link to see if it really did come from the Associated Press. But because it didn't, we have to do a Google News search. And when we do, we see that several reliable news sources, the New York Times, NBC, ABC, USA Today, have all confirmed that this story is true. And here, again, it doesn't really matter if every one of these news sources is perfectly reliable. We're looking for a general consensus about whether this happened or not. And if we want to make sure that we're getting the whole story, we can open each one of these, or the ones that we think are most likely to be reliable, open them in new tabs so we can compare them to one another to make sure that we're getting all the different details that different sources might have shared. Of course, because social networks are all about sharing, we also have to be careful about what we share. After all, our friends and family trust us and count on us to share good information. Before you share anything on social networks, make sure to double check it first. Besides the other steps that we've already talked about, you can use fact-checking sites to see if anyone has debunked a story or verified it before you shared it. We've made a custom search engine that searches dozens of professional fact checkers all at once. You can search it exactly the same way that you search Google, and you can use operators like and or the plus sign or minus sign in your search, and you can put phrases in quotation marks to make your search more specific because it is just a specialized Google search. Another place that a lot of people get information is from sharing sites like YouTube and Pinterest. These are great for how-to videos and other practical information like guitar tutorials and recipes, but not very good for anything more complicated like news or health information. YouTube and sites like it are similar to Wikipedia in that anybody can post things on them, but unlike Wikipedia, nobody is checking to make sure that it's accurate and no one is correcting false information. Because of that, on a lot of topics, there's more bad information than good. If we were to use Google or Wikipedia to look up pyramids, we'd get mostly good information. But doing the same search on YouTube mostly gives us videos promoting theories that no real archaeologist or historian believes. Even if you do pick a good source, like this video from 60 Minutes Australia, you're probably going to see bad sources in the up next bar. That's because these sites suggest what you should watch next using a computer program called an algorithm that decides what they think you're going to want to see or watch. They decide that partly based on what you've clicked on before, and just like social networks, they mostly try to keep you interested long enough to see ads. That's how they make money. These algorithms have learned that people watch extreme and scary videos longer than ones that have good, accurate information. The best way to use a site like YouTube or Pinterest is to search them instead of surfing them. Don't click on anything that's up next or recommended. Use them like a search engine and double check the source, just like you would with Google. You can't be sure right away that 60 Minutes Australia is reliable just from the name. After all, anyone can call themselves anything on the internet. But double checking shows you it's been around since 1996 and has won a number of awards. And looking at this Wikipedia article will also tell you that's their real YouTube channel. So we know it's probably a pretty reliable source. We're going to do another quick quiz to make sure you got all that. First question, who writes articles on Wikipedia? Volunteers, paid writers, university students, or all articles on Wikipedia are adapted from other sources? I think people mostly know this one already. Absolutely. Anyone can write or edit an article on Wikipedia, though some articles are protected so that only Wikipedia editors with accounts can change them. So usually articles about major public figures or controversial topics are locked so that not everyone can edit it. But because they are edited by volunteers, that also tells us the most reliable articles are usually the ones with the most people working to make them accurate. Why do we have to take extra steps to verify anything that we see on Facebook or on other social networks? Is it because it's not always clear where something came from? Because it's not always clear how old something is? Because we trust things more when friends or family share them with us, or all of those? Those are, of course, all reasons why we have to double check anything that we see on social media. And of course, why we have to be especially careful before we share anything ourselves. What is the quickest way to find out if something has already been debunked? Is it to use a social network, to use an encyclopedia, to use a search engine, or to use a fact checker? All right, lots of people sharing. Of course, we just talked about this very recently. And yes, the answer is fact checkers. Fact checkers, like the ones that are searched by our fact checking search, specialize in debunking false claims. And a quick search there can often save you a lot of time. But it is helpful to look at more than one because they cover different topics. And frequently, they may not cover, for instance, things that have happened in Canada. So it's good to be able to search many of them at once, which is why we made our custom fact checker search. YouTube is a good information on news, history, how-to videos, or all of those. As we already heard, YouTube has a lot more bad than good information on many topics. Now, if you find and follow news sources that you know are reliable, and most legitimate TV news do have a YouTube channel, then it can be a good way of following news. So if you go to the CBC channel, the CNN channel, the ABC channel, all of those are good sources of news, but YouTube in general is not. Of course, when it's something like history, we've already seen you're likely to get fringe topics, fringe theories instead of good information. But it can be a very useful source for things where you can tell right away whether the person knows what they're talking about, like guitar lessons or how to fix your dishwasher. I actually did fix my dishwasher with a YouTube video. It can be really helpful for that kind of thing. So let's wrap up by talking about AI, because that's been the biggest change in how we find information, probably in the last 15 years. Now, Wikipedia, search engines, and social networks all have a lot of similarities to AI. And the things that we've learned about those information sources can be really helpful in showing us how to use AI effectively. But we also need to understand a little bit about how they work to be able to use them effectively and to avoid the kind of mistakes that they tend to make. We'll use ChatGPT as our example. It's a kind of AI called a large language model. What does that mean? Well, we're going to go through the three words in reverse order. Like other machine learning algorithms, most of ChatGPT's capabilities, most of what it can do, isn't programmed by a person, but instead it comes from having been trained on large amounts of writing. The program finds patterns in these to create a model of how language works. So it is an algorithm, just like the algorithms that decide what go in the up next bar on YouTube or that decide your search results on Google. But this algorithm decides what the right answer should be when you ask it a prompt. The second part of large language model is language. These tools can read and write fluently at the level of sentences, paragraphs, and even full articles. They do this mostly by looking at how similar or different words are in different ways or dimensions. For example, if we were to consider just two dimensions, roundness and redness, an apple and a fire truck would be very far apart on roundness, but very close together on redness, while a baseball would be close to the apple in terms of redness, but far away in terms of roundness. This is how AI chatbots think in terms of dimensions of language. Chat AIs make guesses about the right answer by looking along different dimensions. If one started at king and looked further away along the female dimension, it would see queen, while if it looked down the youth dimension, it would see prince. And if it looked in both directions at once, that might lead to princess. That's how it makes guesses. And this lets the AI make better guesses about what words should follow each other based on other parts of the sentence or the paragraph. Usually, the kinds of algorithms that guess words, like the autocorrect that you use on your phone, just pay attention to one word at a time. For example, if you were to write, Frida had a drink of chocolate, the autocomplete on your phone might always suggest that the next word after chocolate should be chips, even though that doesn't really make any sense, because that's what follows the word chocolate most often in its training set. But if you asked ChatGPT, what kind of chocolate did Frida drink? It might spot the word drink in your query and then look from chocolate along the liquid dimension and find that the nearest word in that direction was chocolate milk. So unlike the autocorrect on your phone, it holds all of the words in your prompt in its memory while it's making each guess. And if you have a long conversation with it, it holds your previous prompts as well. Let's suppose we're starting with chocolate and looking along the brown and liquid dimensions. If we add a third dimension, let's say edible, we're already reaching the point where it's hard to show those representations visually. And we're also reaching the limits of what most people can hold in our minds after just 3 dimensions. But in ChatGPT, each word is given a value of up to 96 dimensions, and it does more than 9,000 operations every time it guesses a new word. ChatGPT was trained on a data set of around 500 billion words. Now, that kind of scale is how these programs are able to mimic. How they're able to pretend they can use real language and to pretend they have real conversations. But generative AI still works by making guesses based on probability and on how similar words are to one another. That size of the training set and the sophistication of the models means they can make very fluent content. And if that training set included the right answer to your question, you might get accurate information. But large language models are also likely to make hallucinations, where they'll tell you with perfect confidence about things that don't exist. So, how can we use these tools rather, effectively? Well, fortunately, a lot of what we've learned about other information sources is helpful when talking about AI. Just like encyclopedias, you'll get a better result if a lot of other people have asked the same question. One writer described using AI as being like reaching into a bag of words. If the exact thing you're looking for is in the AI's training set, you'll get it. But if it isn't, if not many other people have asked that question before, you might get an answer that sounds confident, but is misleading or even completely false. Just like social networks, use AI to find links to reliable sources. Make sure that the chatbot's search functions are turned on if possible. More and more, chatbots are able to do what's called retrieval augmented generation. And that's just a fancy way of saying that they can use search engines to search sources they weren't trained on in response to your prompt. Now, some AIs like Perplexity automatically give you links to their sources. If you're using one that doesn't, ask it to give you a link to each source. Either way, don't assume that the answer accurately reflects the sources, or even that those sources exist. Open the most important ones in a new tab and skim over them to make sure that they match the answer the AI gave you. Like search engines, you have to be careful your question doesn't imply the answer, like the "are waffles better than pancakes" example that we looked at before. This is actually even more important with AIs because AIs are made to value pleasing you over being accurate, and they will almost never admit they can't answer a question. As a result, they may give you wrong information, especially if they decide it's what you want to hear on a silver platter. You can add things to your prompt like, "give me all the widely held views on the issue," or ask it to say how confident it is in its answer. Another way to limit that is to keep the AI from remembering previous chats. That makes sure that the answer won't be influenced by something you said earlier. Most AI tools do let you turn off that chat history. I'm going to show you how to do it for Google's Gemini. From the main Gemini page, you select Settings and Help, then choose Activity in the menu that pops up. This will bring you to your Gemini app's activity page where you can see if history is on or off. Here you see it's currently on. If we click or tap on that, we get the option to turn history off. And if you've had it in the past, to turn it off and to delete everything it's recorded so far. Another tip is to use a detailed prompt that is as clear as possible. What do you want the response to include, and what should it leave out? How should it approach the prompt? Are you looking for different viewpoints on the topic or for the expert consensus? You can also tell it to only use certain types of sources, recent sources, professional sources, and so on. If the kind of source you want is a bit subjective, like reliable sources, you can ask it to explain why it thinks those sources are reliable. AI expert David Holtz from Columbia University has said that the people who have the best luck with prompts aren't actually engineers or computer experts. They're people who know how to express ideas clearly in everyday language. So give the AI as much information as you can about what you want to hear. For example, you might be particularly worried about the chatbot either hallucinating facts or sources, or not being able to tell the difference between reliable and fringe sources. To deal with these worries, your prompt might say, if you were asking about the pyramids, you might say, don't answer any questions that aren't about Egyptian pyramids. Only draw on sources written by other experts or sources with a well-established record of being reliable and accurate. Give references and links to all of the research you refer to. And you can ask the AI itself to improve your prompt if you want. It's also really helpful to ask more than once with different prompts to follow up your prompt. Research has found changing your prompt to get a better response has just as big an effect on accuracy as switching to a more advanced AI model. So now, of course, these companies are always trying to get you to use the paid version of each of these chatbots, but just asking a follow-up question or trying a second time is just as good at getting you better results as paying for the professional version. Here are some follow-ups that you might use. For instance, give me information from the most reliable sources and explain why they're reliable. What do the most recent sources say, and how recent are they? What evidence is there for or against whatever? Give me the most important background information on whatever. So here's another exercise you can try later to test everything we've learned today. Imagine that you want to know what breed of dog is best suited to a house with small children in it. Think about how you might answer that question using Google, using Wikipedia, using YouTube, using Facebook, and using AI. What kind of answers would you get from each one? Which one would give you the best information most easily? So we're about to take questions, and I will take a look at the Q&A and at the chat, but I do want to also, while we're doing questions, ask that you take 5 minutes to complete the second workshop evaluation survey. It's similar to the one at the beginning of the workshop. It'll help to evaluate and improve our workshops and our general programming. Once again, your answers are completely anonymous. And you can fill in this one even if you didn't do the first one, but if you did both, that's terrific as well. So now I'm going to take a look back through the chat. I did see some questions come in at the beginning, so I'm going to scroll back up above all of your answers for the quizzes. So our first question is, if you snip a photo, is that safe? So instead of clicking on it in case it's not safe, if you snip a tool, is that okay? So if you mean snipping it or using a screenshot, so that generally will be safe. The only risk is if it has a QR code in it, like the one you see on our screen right now. So if you get a screenshot of a QR code, it still has the link in it. But otherwise, taking a screenshot or snipping an image generally should be safe. We have some questions about the recording of the webinar. I think those were answered. Okay. And going through everyone's answers to the quizzes. Okay, so someone is saying changing. This looks like more of a comment than a question, but it's an interesting observation. Someone saying they changed Wikipedia once, changed the word crocodile to alligator because the animal in the movie was an alligator, but I didn't really need to prove why I thought it was an alligator. People agreed with me, so the alligator word was kept. Um, it really depends. So the question is, should they have accepted it? Right? What I think the question is should they have accepted that change when you didn't give evidence? Um, and I think it depends on the article. So in this case, we're looking at an article about a movie. Probably the standards of evidence are a little lighter. It really does depend on the editors of that particular article. So I was actually in a similar situation. Someone I know or someone I saw who studies uh, ancient animals, pointed out an error in a Wikipedia page about a particular kind of bird, saying that a lot of archaeologists don't believe this bird ever existed. Um, so I went and changed the article. My change was actually undone because I hadn't given a source. So I then went back, I added the source that this person originally had pointed me to, and then it was the change was accepted. So it just shows that different articles really are different communities. But in general, Wikipedia is pretty good about particularly correcting mistakes. So an example I like to give is many people have heard of the house hippo. You can see a little house hippo um, over my left shoulder there. There is a Wikipedia article on the house hippo, and every now and then someone will change it to say that house hippos are real. And you can look at the edit history of that article, and you can see those changes never last more than about 15 minutes before they're changed back. So it's a good example of how when people are changing Wikipedia maliciously, those changes almost always get changed back very quickly. So next question, is it safe to click links on Facebook photos? They will only give some of the story and then they post the link in the comments to get the rest of the story. Is that scammers? It would really depend. I'm not going to say it's ever safe to click on links because if you don't know where the article is coming from, they could be scammers. Um, if you're worried and it's a news story, it's always better to go to Google and do a search for that news story and go to the news tab. Just like if you get an email or a text message that says it's from your bank or your credit card company or Netflix, don't click on the links there. Go to the homepage of your bank or your credit card company or Netflix. Check your account on the web address or the app that you know is reliable. But if it's a friend of yours who's sharing it, unless you think it's likely that they would share links from scammers, then you can probably follow it. Another question, how reliable is Fox News? So when we talk about the reliability of a news source, we have to distinguish between news coverage and opinion uh, coverage. Most of the time, when a news source has a bias, that bias is mostly in the opinion coverage. Where we see bias in a news is usually in the choice of what to cover and not to cover. So generally speaking, Fox News is still pretty accurate in its news coverage. There's very little that they publish in the news coverage that is false, but they're very selective in what they choose to cover. And so, for instance, things that are seen as embarrassing in some way to President Trump, or things that the viewers on Fox would not want to hear about, would not like hearing about, tend not to get covered. And that's one of the reasons why one of the best ways to get news is to look at more than one source. And that's easy to do now because we have the internet. You don't need to subscribe to multiple newspapers. You don't need to go to a magazine shop and buy a bunch of newspapers and magazines. You can check different sources at the click of a button. And a lot of them are still free. Canadian Press has free articles. CTV, Global, CBC, BBC, and The Guardian in the United Kingdom. There are many, many sources that you can still read without a subscription. So I recommend looking at multiple different sources, especially on a topic that is at all controversial. Okay, we've got some more questions or possibly comments. I'm going to scroll down through the answers to our second quiz. Someone observes you can write anything and the AI will tell you anything, even if you write, how it will tell you how amazing you are. I'm going to start that over. You can write anything and the AI will tell you how amazing you are, even if you write something silly. That's a very good observation. And it'll also tell you things that just make no sense at all if you ask it questions that make no sense at all. And that's a good way to demonstrate, especially to kids, that you have to use it critically because it will answer you even when your questions make no sense. People talking about the QR codes, there is a link to the post-workshop survey. Someone says, aren't some QR codes bad? Yes, a QR code is like a link. And just like a link, it can take you somewhere dangerous. It can take you to a site that will put malware on your device. So just like with any link, you should only use a QR code if you have good reason to trust the people who are sharing it with you. And thank you for Get Cybersafe for sharing information on how to use QR codes safely. I do encourage everyone to check that link. Talking about CAPTCHAs. So if someone asks, can you talk about CAPTCHAs? I was told there are now scams with CAPTCHAs and they rely on us thinking that it's safe to use. How do I know when it's a bad CAPTCHA? And absolutely, it also says they'll stop asking so many questions, but please keep asking questions. We love questions. So this is, I'm not aware, I have not heard about a scam using CAPTCHAs. I can't say that it doesn't exist, but I'm afraid I don't really know how you would necessarily tell. But generally speaking, what if you're concerned, CAPTCHAs always have an option to switch to audio. Um, a real CAPTCHA will always have an option to switch to audio because they have to be accessible to people who are blind or have low vision. So what I would recommend, if you're concerned, is switch to the audio version. And if there is no option to switch to audio, that would be a sign that it is not a real CAPTCHA. Thank you. Thanks from Get Cyber Safe. This is new. I'm learning something too. And I've had being asked to share the post workshop survey link. So I'm going to post for everyone the post survey link that just went in there. And okay, can Big Brother down south follow what you click, for instance, on trans rights to use it against you in the future? So it really depends on where the servers that your web traffic is going over are located. It is one of the reasons why at MediaSmarts we make sure that all of our servers are located here in Canada, because we have no control over the laws and what government or law enforcement is able to do in other countries. I don't know all of the American laws and regulations that address what government and law enforcement can access, but generally speaking, they have been more willing to do surveillance of web traffic there. And of course, we are aware that they have been checking social media accounts and personal devices when people cross the border. So I certainly wouldn't say that you should censor yourself based on that concern. But of course, we do have to be aware that when we are using services that are located in other countries or have servers in other countries, then we are subject to their laws, the laws of that country. Um, Here's a follow-up question. Can you delete your history, or can they still find what you looked up? Maybe just say nice things about Big Brother online before you go visit. Unfortunately, it is very difficult to fully delete things online. Certainly, you could, if you wanted, remove things from your social network accounts, and that would hide it from a casual search. But uh, keep in mind, anytime we send something, anytime we send an email, anytime we post something on a social network, what we're really doing is our computer is telling another computer to make a copy of that thing. And even when we delete it, those copies are not necessarily deleted. They may stay on the server of the company that runs it. So even when you delete things from Facebook, even if you're using something like Instagram or Snapchat, where things are deleted after a certain amount of time, that doesn't necessarily mean they're deleted from the servers of the company that runs that platform. And I think I'm going to see if there's anything in the queue. Okay, we have nothing in the Q&A, but we've got one more. And yes, absolutely, it is a privacy issue. So that seems to be all of our questions. I'll wait for another moment or two to see if anything comes in. I think I can stop sharing. But if anyone hasn't yet, I do encourage people to click on that link for the post-workshop survey. And please do share with us what you thought and any suggestions that you have for improving it, because we're always working to try to make sure that these are as helpful and informative as possible. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you to Get Cybersafe for having us and giving us the opportunity to do this workshop for you.